and welcome back to day 2 of Doodle Therapy. It's great to be back. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined with our very special guest, artist Amy Wibowo. Hi, Amy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Alice.
Yeah, it's great to see everyone in the chat. If you're joining us live, definitely say hi and maybe share where you're joining from. And it'd be fun to hear a little bit about how everyone's day is going. So hey to Sam and to Raphael and to Andre in the chat. So if you're new to this stream, Doodle Therapy is a hour in which we come together to just relax, chill, and draw, and just get into the flow of doodling. So it's great to see everyone and to be joined here by our very special guest, Amy. Amy, I'm going to throw some of your work up on the stream, and would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. So I'm a creative technologist that likes to work in a bunch of different mediums. So I write zines about computers. I like designing and making games in Unity. I like 3D modeling in Cinema 4D, and then also digital illustration.
Cool. Yes, that's quite a diverse range of mediums. And like I mentioned, I am an artist and muralist based in SF as well. Some of my work's up here, and you might have seen my murals around places in the Bay Area, like at Phil's Coffee, tech offices, etc. So yeah, it's great to be back. Hi to Abraham, to Julio, to Ivy. Nice to see everyone again. And we're excited to share our works because we started on our sketches from yesterday, day 1. So if you're new to the stream, basically the way this works is Doodle Therapy is an interactive show, which means that every week we have a different doodle prompt. And around that prompt, we have an activity that anyone can participate in, regardless of your age or your skill level. You can use, your favorite drawing app like Photoshop or Fresco, or even, a piece of paper and some crayons. So this week's theme is all about celebrating childhood nostalgia and the influences and inspirations that we've taken from our childhood, whether it's our favorite TV shows, snacks, stories, technology, etc. And we are celebrating that by drawing that in some way in an illustration. And also, if you are able to participate in the prompt and send it to me on social media, then we'll pick a winner to receive a special giveaway prize. So this week, just want to say congrats to Ivy, who submitted this super cute illustration of her favorite snacks from childhood. And you will be receiving a sticker pack from both myself as well as Amy. So congrats, Ivy. Yay. Yeah, so if you weren't able to submit your drawing, feel free to still share it with me on social media. I'm at by Alice Lee on Instagram, Twitter, Behance, and would still love to see it. So yeah, let's maybe dive into the art pieces that we started creating and recap where we started off yesterday. Amy, would you like to share, how far you got and, what you're thinking about drawing?
Oh, sure. So I was inspired by the websites and blogs that I used to frequent when growing up. And it was also how I learned to write HTML and learn how to code. And I remember there being a lot of anime fan sites with a lot of pastel colors. I feel like a lot of the web design innovation around that time was from teenage girls and their anime fan sites, or just fan sites in general. So I was trying to capture that energy. And yesterday I started off with, let's see, this sketch right here. Let me make that a little more opaque, and worked on it yesterday to add in some more lines, like refine my line art. Yeah, so this is where I'm at right now.
That's so cute. And Amy, I know that you do a lot of work on the engineering side of things, as well as design and tech. So I'm just curious, like, how do you feel like that inspired your, eventual aesthetic now as an adult?
So I feel like I am really inspired by the aesthetics from the era where I learned how to code and first started exploring the internet, like all of the dreamy pastels that were around that time, and the anime aesthetics that were in a lot of websites at that time. And also, I feel like as tech and websites have kind of shifted to become more minimalist and more like purely functional, I think that I am trying to steer at least my personal tech and web aesthetics back towards the ones that I was familiar with as a teenager.
Yeah, I totally feel you. I remember making my first website on Angel Fire when I was like in 5th grade or something. And I just remember all the like really wacky experimental aesthetics of that time on the internet.
Yeah, it was such a fun time on the internet.
Yeah. Oh, I also just want to say hi to everyone joining us in the chat. Hey to Devin, who's joining us, who we've referenced Devin's project 3D for Designers many times on this stream. I think that there's a lot of people who are taking her class or are inspired by her work. So hi to Devin, and hi to Paulo, who says, Amy, your screen looks so cute. And hey to Shirley, as well as to Shauna and Ember. Cool. Yeah, I think like I mentioned yesterday, I feel like a lot of designers and engineers that I know today as adults got into what they're literally doing now as their career because of an experience that they had, building websites or just messing around and like having fun on the internet when they were teenagers, like back in the late 90s or early 2000s. So it's kind of cool to think about how these childhood inspirations like may have directly influenced your aesthetic today. I will also share a little bit about my piece. So this is the sketch that I started off with yesterday. And you can see from my mood board that I am really inspired by a lot of TV shows that I used to watch from my childhood, like Sailor Moon, Pokemon, a lot of Pixar shows. And I think that this like magical surrealism really influences my work today as an adult. So this is the sketch I started off with. And yesterday after the stream, I colored it in a little bit, but my whole idea is that I'm illustrating a scene from my childhood desk. So I've got my favorite snacks, I've got my, fuzzy pen, maybe a piece of binder paper because I'm doing homework. I don't know if everyone can catch some of these really minor references, but I've got this like Hello Panda cracker and this White Rabbit candy, as well as just these like old school cell phone charms that I don't see as much anymore. So yeah, and today I'm just going to be finishing up the piece, drawing in some of these details. So yeah, this is a little bit of my process where I'll usually start off with a rough sketch and then I'll paint in the shapes. And then today I'm going to be, filling in some of those details and using that original sketch as a reference. Oh, and thanks to everyone in the chat who's sharing. Like Ember says that they only know Pocky. If you're joining us live, feel free to share your favorite childhood nostalgic snacks from when you were young. So for me, that was like definitely Pocky, definitely these like Asian rice crackers, definitely White Rabbit candies, Hello Panda treats. What about you, Amy?
Mine were many of the same. I love Pocky, the Hello Pandas, the Hello Koalas, the little fruit jelly snacks, and then Yan Yans.
Oh, I love
And
those. Yeah.
I don't know if this happened with you, but because we went to the Asian grocery store once a month, and the trip was really long. So my parents would promise me like one snack that I could get if I behaved while they were shopping. And so that's how I became familiar with all of these Asian snacks.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Same here. We would only go to the Asian grocery store near our house, which I think is a common or like a common experience for a lot of immigrant families to visit the grocery store that you're culturally familiar with in terms of like the food. So I just kind of grew up on all of these like Asian treats too. Oh, and Devin wants to know what's the name of the koala guys with the chocolate inside. I think that's related to these panda snacks, right? Because they were like in the Hello Panda family for sure.
Oh, I think that they're called Koala March. I don't know
Koala
why.
March.
Yeah, I don't know why I remember that.
So
But they
cute.
have special Halloween ones where all the koalas are like dressed as witches or vampires or skeletons instead of their
Oh,
usual occupation.
cool. Yeah, that is really cute. And yesterday we actually ended the stream on a really interesting conversation that we were having, Amy. I think someone in the chat had asked about how we got started in illustration. And given that we both have taken pretty unconventional paths, like I went to business school and Amy studied CS in college, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was really fun to share, our paths towards art. So maybe we can pick up that conversation.
Totally. So, Alice, I was curious what resources you used to keep working on your art while you were in business school.
Oh yeah. And if anyone watching in the chat has also had a like non-traditional path towards art, so maybe you didn't go to art school, or maybe you found art later in your life, or not when you were like between the ages of 18 to 22, which is like when people go to typically graduate college, high school and start on their career. But like if you kind of found art in a different path than a lot of the default ways, definitely share your story, because I think it's inspiring to hear. But I went to business school as for college, and then I ended up studying marketing and operations. But I realized that I wasn't really that interested in pursuing a lot of the business-related careers that were laid out for you in that environment. Like I didn't want to become a consultant or a banker, for example. So I got into design actually because I did a lot of hackathons when I was a college student, which is basically like a 24 to 48 hour sprint where people just like work on projects, and it's kind of a competition. And that's how I feel like I just quickly got a grasp on the design worlds, and naturally just kind of flowed from there, like in the rest of my career. And I do sometimes like to watch online videos and tutorials since I never went to art school. And I'm almost like jealous of people who did get that traditional art school experience, because there's a part of me that is just really curious about, what it's like to learn in such a structured way. But on the other hand, I think that having to seek out your own resources, it makes you a little bit like scrappier, which I think has also helped me a lot. Because as an artist, you have to run your own business.
Totally. That's so cool that you got into design from hackathons. I don't think I knew that.
Oh yeah. How about yourself? We were talking a little earlier about, like I was asking you about when you felt like you really started to explore illustration like professionally. And when do you feel like that was for you, and how did you develop that skill?
So when I started writing zines about computers, I'm a very visual learner, so I like to include a lot of diagrams and a lot of illustrations to help kind of like further explain what I was talking about with words. And then, so I began to draw a lot more once I started writing zines, but I think I didn't start thinking of myself as an illustrator until I drew what would later become the design of my Get It Girl shirt. But I was just drawing it for fun, and some people said that they would want to wear it on a shirt. And I was like, really? People would want to wear my art? So I think that's when I started thinking of myself as, oh, maybe I am an illustrator, even though I've never had any formal training in it.
Oh, cool.
But you, Alice?
Oh, I'm happy to share my story, but before I jump into that, I totally want to give you props because if you're not familiar with Amy's work, you should totally check her out. She is also known as Sailor HG on the internet. But Amy, for example, writes a lot of computer science scenes that explain computer concepts in a really simple and easy to understand way that is still very like technically, like she does. I don't feel like your zines like mince words when it comes to like the technical side of things, but you just convey it in a way that's understandable. And I really,
thank you, Alice.
Yeah, and I really see you as a very like multidisciplinary type of artist. So I'm actually curious, when you posted that first illustration that, in your words, was kind of like the inflection point for when you started to think of yourself as an illustrator. Did you struggle with confidence when it came to posting it? Like, were you shy about it, or was it more just like, oh, it's for fun, so like not super attached to the outcome?
I think that because I have a non-traditional art background and I didn't necessarily see myself as an artist, I don't think that I had much ego attached to my work, because I was like, this is just a drawing I did for fun. So I think that helped me not have much insecurity about posting that drawing at that time.
That makes sense. Do you feel like when you then later started to become more into illustration, did that ever creep into your thinking? Or like yesterday, there was a question in the chat about imposter syndrome. So just curious if you ever experienced any of that.
Oh yeah, I think I definitely experience a lot of imposter syndrome around art from having not had any formal training in it. And I guess even in computer science and electrical engineering, where I have formal training in that, I can still feel like, because they're such broad subjects, it's impossible to be an expert on every single part of computer science.
Totally.
But yeah, I think more people being open about like, oh yeah, I have to Google, I've been an engineer for 10 years and I still have to Google whenever I'm like coding, I still have to Google for references, has helped me feel better about needing to do that myself. And for art, I think I still have some imposter syndrome around it, but also I am trying to tap back into like the joy I got from art when I was a kid and was just drawing for fun, which I feel like is also the point of your show, which I love.
Yeah, that is the point. Yeah, if you're drawing along as well, like that is something that I try to say a lot on the stream, which is like, if you're participating in the activities, or even if you're just drawing along and not necessarily, doing the same topic or theme, my whole goal with this is to draw in a way that doesn't feel self-conscious, because I noticed recently that I can be sometimes a little self-conscious now about my artwork, because it often has an audience attached to it, whether that's a client or for a client's audience or for my audience. And I really think it's really helpful with your artwork to try to not, at least when you're drawing it, to try to not be terribly self-conscious about it. And that kind of gets back to why we liked illustration in the first place.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat. So hi to Maggie, and thank you for sharing your experience as well. And hey to Ken and Catherine. It's awesome to see all of our friends joining us in the chat. Oh, and hi to Dean. Yeah, if you are joining us midway through the stream, definitely feel free to say hi and introduce yourself, since this is a really friendly community and a really friendly chat. So Amy, I have a follow-up question, which is, and I know this is kind of like a hard question to answer, but do you have any advice to people who might be experiencing imposter syndrome for similar reasons, whether it's because they recently got into art or they don't have this like traditional background with art?
I think my advice would be that remember that probably all of the people that you look up to feel imposter syndrome as well.
That's very helpful to remember. Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Amy.
Oh, of course. Thank you for asking such good questions, Alice.
Oh, thanks. So Amy, I think you asked a little bit also about my experience getting into art. And to answer your question, I really felt a lot of imposter syndrome, especially towards the beginning of my career. But actually, what's really inspiring to me is surrounding myself with artists who also got into art in non-traditional ways. So they, for example, like you, Amy, and seeing my friends succeed and find their voice, even though they didn't necessarily, get the degree or whatever the gatekeepy kind of standard is. So yeah. Oh, and Devin in the chat makes a really great point, which is beginner's mind is really important, and we can sometimes talk ourselves out of even trying new things all the time, which I totally agree with.
Totally.
Yeah.
And thank you, Alice. You're a huge inspiration to me as well.
Yeah, totally. Jeffrey in the chat is referencing this awesome quote by Ira Glass. And if you're not familiar with it, I totally recommend checking it out. But it's basically a short, a thought that he has about creativity, talent, and skill. And basically, to sum it up, he explains that oftentimes, when we're starting out, we all have taste and we all have skill. And when you're a beginner, your taste level is pretty decent. Like, that's why you got into the work and the art in the first place. But your skill level is what's lacking. Like, your ability to execute on that vision that you have is lacking because, you're just starting off. So oftentimes people will give up because of that gap between their skill and their taste. But if you remember like why you got into this in the first place, which is your taste level, that's always there. And eventually over time, your skill will increase. So, I think one of the points that he's trying to make is like, don't give up because you will improve. And I remember when I was starting to learn how to draw, I learned basically on the job when I worked as a product designer at Dropbox, which in itself was like a very scary experience because I think learning how to draw on the job is like frightening. And then like I was 21 at the time too, so like it was extra scary. But I realized, and I made up this like analogy, which is I feel like drawing is kind of like a fine wine, and you don't see it. You don't see your skills improve day by day, but they actually really do. And it's something that you just kind of have to have faith in that like what you put in, you will get back, whether that's in a year or in several months.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Devin is actually an old coworker of mine at Dropbox. We were there pretty early on in 2013, and she's referencing that like I would be like nervously learning how to draw, and then like the co-founder or like someone who is you know, a major stakeholder would like be kind of like hovering and like watching me try to figure out how to, you know, use Photoshop or something. So kind of a scary experience, but I think it taught me how to draw, like, or it forced me to learn really quickly. Yeah, Martha says it's the gap between your taste and your experience, and I think your experience is directly correlated with your skill. Shirley says in the chat, she actually notices that she stops herself from learning new things because she's like, oh, I'm out of school, it's too late now, and then she has to correct herself and say like, no, learning is for like all the time, basically. And I totally agree. I think I noticed that I sometimes will have a tendency to like hold myself back from doing new things, and I'll just say like, oh, maybe I should take a class or like read a book first. But then oftentimes it's actually just fun to like jump in and learn as you go. And Erica asks, when you look up for inspiration, which artists do you look up to and who are your favorite inspirations? That's a great question. Amy, do you have any favorite artists that you look up to?
I think many of my favorite artists are shoujo manga artists that I've really admired since growing up. So like the creator of Sailor Moon, Naoko Takahashi, and the artist behind Ranma One Half are two of my biggest inspirations.
Oh, cool. Love that.
How about you, Alice?
Oh yeah, I think that I get a lot of inspiration from like a lot of traditional sources, like historic Chinese painting, for example. But if I were to name specific artists, I think one of my biggest inspirations right now is this artist named James Jean. You should totally check out his work. It's mind-blowingly amazing. I admire both his artwork as well as the dexterity that he has when working between many different mediums. He'll do a lot of stuff like, you know, a flat digital illustration to these like massive murals and very like sculptural pieces as well. And that's a lot of career inspiration for me, because I also want to have a similar approach with my career.
Awesome. I hadn't heard of him before, so I'll have to check out
he's
his work.
amazing. I think you would love his work. Yeah, I have this analogy that I like to give about my career often, which is I like to think about my career as a garden with different plots, and each plot represents a different field or a different industry. So, for example, I have a plot that is, I call it a tech plot. It's like tech illustration, and I worked in tech for a very long time, so that plot is doing well and, you know, sustaining a lot of the garden, so to speak, because I invested the most time in it when I was younger. But there's other plots too, like there's advertising, there's editorial, there's publishing, fashion, murals, installation, public art, and some of these plots I've already started working on, like murals and advertising has been my focus for the last year. And then some of them only have like a seed or something, a seed in them. Like I've done like one fashion thing. But eventually at the end of my career, I want to see all those plots thriving. And that's what I would consider to be like a successful career, is not just like one really, really tall tree in one plot, but like a thriving garden for like all of the plots. So not sure if that's helpful to anyone, but I just thought I would share, and I think it's kind of illustrates the different ways that you can potentially think about your career.
I love that analogy so much.
Thanks. Oh yes, Devin says she loves this analogy. She feels the same way, and a single tree sounds kind of lonely. I agree, and also, at least for me, like I think I just get bored very easily. So I'm definitely not knocking, you know, anyone who decides like they want to be the best at like X niche thing. But for me, I get bored really easily and I really like trying and learning new things. And someone made the point that biodiversity is actually good. So yeah, it's also healthy if this was a real garden. You have multiple plants.
Totally. I feel really similarly about getting bored of just doing one thing and wanting to explore lots of different areas and styles and mediums. And at first, I was like worried that this would mean that like I would never become like I would never specialize and become really good at one thing. But I think that what I lose from not specializing, I gain from being able to like cross apply the lessons I learned from one area to different areas.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense as well. I think like my parents used to encourage me more to go in one specific direction, but I actually think that in the time that we're living in now with like social media, you can actually be simply rewarded for exploring and trying to push those boundaries artistically, because you can build up your own audience and your own niche instead of having to stay in like one very specific lane, which may have been how it used to be. So yeah. And Simeon says they have to go to a meeting. So see you later, Simeon, and thanks for joining us.
Speaking of learning new things, is there anything new that you're currently learning that you're excited about?
Ooh, that's a great question. Let me think. I feel like with the stream, with the quarantine, with COVID, this year I've actually learned a lot more about video production that I normally would not have gotten the chance to explore. Like with this stream, for example, having to set up camera and lighting and learning how that all works. And then I recently did a project with Adobe, another team at Adobe, where I had to like film my own video. And so that in itself was like learning how to edit video and how to use Premiere and all of that. So that is a new skill that I've actually really enjoyed. How about yourself?
That's super cool. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but one new thing that I'm picking up is I'm learning ARM assembly it's a programming language in order to be able to write operating systems for the Raspberry Pi. So I'm hoping to use that to make themed operating systems for my Frog and my Fruit computers.
Ooh, cool.
Oh, and someone asked yesterday about the Frog computer, so I just want to share that quickly, what that looks like. So this is the Frog computer that I made that first modeled in Cinema 4D. Shout out to Devin for teaching me everything I know about 3D modeling. And then mocked it up in a CAD program in order to figure out like how to laser cut all the pieces and put them together, and then put in a Raspberry Pi and a Pimoroni screen. So currently it's just running the Raspberry Pi operating system, but I'm trying to learn assembly so that I can write my own Frog themed operating system to put on this computer.
That's so cool, Amy. That's like, but you just named like 5 different disciplines. Like 3D modeling, like hardware stuff. That is so cool. Oh yes, if you are a fan of this cute frog computer, share a frog emoji in the chat. Yeah, that is so inspiring. It's very inspiring, I think, to see people kind of creating their own self-initiated projects like this that very uniquely combine their skills.
Thank you, Alice. I think that's my ideal kind of project that has a lot of different disciplines and combining them together for my end goal.
Cool, love it. Yeah, if anyone in the chat is also excited about something that they're learning right now, please feel free to share. It's always really fun to see what everyone is working on and the new skills that people are gaining. So Amy, we are about halfway through the stream, and I thought that we could take it a little bit back to what we're working on. So do you mind sharing a little bit about where you are in your process for this piece and what you would typically do next?
Oh, sure. So I'm on my second round of line art currently. And usually I do one round of line art that has all the lines approximately where I want them to be. So that would be these lines right here. And the next thing I do is have another layer of line art where the lines are more stylized. So because I'm not worried about the lines being in the right place or where I want them to be anymore, I can just trace where I've drawn the lines before. I try to give these lines some more personality, make them a little bit more dynamic, like vary the thickness, play with interesting brush textures. Yeah, so that's what I'm up to right now.
That's so cool.
How about for you?
So one thing that I think is really interesting about this stream and seeing our work side by side is that I actually think that we have really different approaches to illustration. As you can see, Amy's approach is very line-based, and my approach is very shape-based. And so I will incorporate things like these lines, but that's kind of something that I add later on as more of an accent piece as opposed to the thing that's guiding me. So right now, starting off with the sketch that I made, oops, that should be above. With the sketch that I made, I'm basically, coloring in each section of it and treating my sketch as guidelines for where I want to go, but they're very rough. And so right now, I was working on the cell phone, which is modeled after my actual phone that I had. And I was thinking it could be a picture of both of us in the middle. But
so cute.
Yeah, I am now want to work on this glittery fuzzy pen. It's similar to this one on my mood board that I used to have. I used to write in a journal every day, and I would try to use fun little pens like this. So I'm trying to get that feather texture just right.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's very Legally Blonde.
Oh, yeah. Love that movie. Ooh, Dean says that he has been learning about plot and character development as part of a project that he's working on. That's so cool, Dean. Oh, Devin thought that this was a palm tree. That's funny. That's cool.
For the sake of vulnerability,
Ooh,
I was going to talk about things that I struggle with art. So I have a really hard time with hands. And I used to try to kind of pretend that I didn't have a hard time with hands by just putting people's hands behind their backs or in their pockets. But lately I've been trying to embrace I won't get better at drawing hands until I draw a lot of bad hands and eventually get better. So I'm trying to draw more hands even though it's hard.
Yeah, hands are hard.
There's a thing that you struggle with or you feel like is your art nemesis.
Yeah, that is a great question. Let me think. I think one thing that I have struggled a lot with has been facial expressions. I think, the way that I used to draw faces is very, very simple, and I have wanted to kind of up my game there a lot in the last couple years. So that's something that I've been working on a lot. And as you can see, I left the faces for last to do because I just wanted to like render the heck out of everything else. Yeah. Shirley and Catherine in the chat are saying that hands are very hard, and I totally agree. Ooh, Cody says anything in forced perspective. Yeah, I think perspective can be tricky as well. Yeah, one piece of advice that I got for hands from someone who is a former animator was you can actually go on like Pinterest, for example, or even like Google and just search for animation hands references. And sometimes you'll find these like sketch packs that people have put together of hands in different positions. And just studying those, trying to recreate those can be a great way to learn more about hands.
Ooh, I love that. Thank you for the tip.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing your vulnerability about faces. I love how you draw faces, so I would have never known that you felt that way about them unless you had said.
Yeah, totally. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about with my art has been trying to push it so, because I think, you know, my comfort spot has often been drawing stuff that is like very sweet and pleasant, because that's what I just like as a person. But drawing more difficult emotions, for example, like anger, sadness, has been more challenging for me. So I often will try to push that a little bit. But I find it a little hard because, you know, I think when you're known for a certain kind of look or aesthetic, that's naturally what clients gravitate towards you for. So to make a change like that has to really come from self-initiated work.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Ooh, Dean says that one tip they heard about drawing hands is to think of them as mittens. So yeah, that's helpful. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks for the tip. I used to literally draw hands as mittens when I was too scared to draw.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would sometimes hide them too. And I think, you know, it makes sense. Like, I remember when I was learning how to draw at Dropbox, I was pretty scared half the time, mostly because I was like, again, like 21, 22, and in my first job as well. But I think I just like developed a sense for what I could draw and what was very challenging for me to draw. And, you know, when it came to specific projects that I would get, I would try to, you know, steer more in one direction if I knew that it was like a very high stakes sort of thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, a exercise that a mentor of mine once told me is just take a sheet of paper and spend 10 minutes trying to list out as many objects as you can that you enjoy drawing. So for me, that would be like, I would write like birds, fish, animals, outfits, plants, interesting trees, clouds, you know, etc. And if you can get to like 100 items, that's awesome. And then at the end of it, that is basically all of the things that you naturally love to draw. And that becomes your visual vocabulary, like your bank of words, basically, to express yourself with as an artist, or at least like a good starting point. So not sure if that is helpful as well.
I like that idea.
Ooh, thanks, Maggie, for saying that you like the Hello Panda. Yeah, I think the perspective was something that I forced quite a bit in this piece. For example, this guy is round, but I drew him more flat. And then I had a lot of fun doing the lighting on these sorts of dimensional objects. Right now I'm trying to draw glitter, which sounded fun, but is actually kind of proving to be a little hard. So Amy, I'm curious, when it comes to your art, do you ever try to share your art for feedback before you publish it, or is that something that you openly just share with others, whether it's like a client or on social media? Like, how do you go about getting feedback on your pieces?
Sorry about that. My internet blipped out for a little bit.
Amy? Oh, sorry.
Hello, sorry about that. My internet blipped out for a little bit.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. But I was actually asking Amy, do you have a specific type of approach when it comes to getting feedback on your pieces? Like, how does that typically work for you?
I think it's a really informal process.
Oh, I think on Amy's side, we're getting a little bit of technical difficulties. So I'll just continue drawing and we'll wait for her to come back on. Hey, Amy.
Hello. Sorry, I'm trying to see what is happening with my internet.
Oh, yeah. In the meantime, I'll answer some questions from the chat. So,
Okay.
Devin wants to know how old we were when we started getting into stuff like glitter, makeup, etc. I feel like maybe in middle school. And also, I feel like I kind of repressed a lot of these things when I got older, but then as I got more connected with my artistic side, I started to embrace this stuff more in my personal life too, which has been really fun. Cool. Thanks, Amy. And Rupali says, awesome light shadow effect. Thank you. Yeah, that is a really fun part of this process, which is to add all those final little touches, like I was working on the cell phone grid and just adding in all these little, do you remember these types of like keypads where it was like slightly indented, and it's almost like, I don't even remember what the material was like. It was almost like this silicone kind of style.
I totally remember those, and I remember having to text by like pushing the buttons like 3 times.
Yeah.
To get all the different letters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a topic in itself of just like outdated skills that we knew as kids. Yeah. Yes, like Rupali says, they're kind of this rubbery feeling, so I think I'll have fun with adding those shadows. And for anyone who's watching this, if you have any questions about our approach or what specifically we're doing, definitely let me know. I am currently I'm drawing it in with the paintbrush tool, and then I'm using this smudger tool to kind of blend in that color because I want it to feel like this rubbery kind of texture. And Catherine, I do not remember what T9 was, but I have a TI 89, I think, calculator. Can I, for also the sake of vulnerability, Amy, can I ask you a question?
Oh, sure.
I was curious, how do you intentionally ever go about trying to develop or manage your creative confidence and your relationship to your artwork? Oh, sorry about that. Looks like we lost Amy for a little bit. But yeah, maybe I'll throw it back to the chat if anyone has any personal thoughts about how they like to manage that creative confidence side of things. I think that that's a common theme that we've gotten from, from the questions that I'll sometimes get in this chat. And it'd be really interesting to think about how people are approaching that right now. There also seems to be in the chat conversations about the TI-89 calculator. Yes, I would also say if we're talking about childhood nostalgia, which is the theme of this week, those graphing calculators are like peak nostalgia for me. And I don't even think I've come close to using a graphing calculator like that in my normal life, but yeah. I think we're just going to switch over to this view for now, until Amy comes back. Yeah. Dark Hour says they must have been 13 when they got into makeup, but they fell out of love in it, and now at 24, they are finding their way back to it. That is awesome. Yes, same here. Maggie says, anyone remember sticker earrings? They wanted earrings so bad, but they were never able to pierce their ears. Yes, I was also never able to pierce my ears. So I would get clip-ons all the time. Oh, my clip-on just fell off. Fun stuff. I love this conversation about nostalgia.
I'm back again.
Hi, Amy.
So sorry for the internet trouble.
Oh, no worries. I mean, speaking of internet trouble, that was kind of like the defining nostalgic memory from my childhood, right? It's like when we had a dial-up.
Oh my God.
And you had to like wait. Yeah.
No one could be on a phone call at the same time. So my parents would have to kick me off the internet anytime they wanted to use the phone.
Yeah, I remember that. Or I think we talked about this in the stream yesterday, or we talked about this with someone recently, where to download things, you would just like set it on your computer overnight because the internet was so slow.
Oh my God, I do remember that.
Yeah. So Amy, before you left, I asked the chat to share a little bit about their process for managing creative confidence and their relationship with their work. And so Devin says before their accident, they did a lot to manage psychology, like meditation, journaling, etc. And so since their accident, they now don't do any of that. They just say no fear and do it. And Devin, I would also say, I think seeing you as someone who appears to be, very confidently going about sharing your work and new projects, I actually think that is very uplifting and inspiring to a lot of people. So that's probably like not your primary intention, but thank you for being an inspiration to a lot of people in the community as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So on my end, I think I've been trying to do a lot of work lately to decouple my sense of worth from my productivity, which is hard. But I used to be afraid of working on this because I thought if I don't tie my sense of productivity to my sense of worth, like how will I motivate myself to get all the stuff done that I want to get done? Mm-hmm. But I feel like when I was younger, I still did a lot of drawing, but it was because I loved drawing. And so many of the things that you do when you're younger, you do because you really like doing them and they're fun, and not because of tying them to your self-worth or feeling like you need to be a productive member of society. So I'm trying to tap into that childhood mentality and make stuff because I'm interested and curious about it, and not because I tie my sense of self-worth to it. And it's been really hard, but I feel like it has really improved my relationship with my art and also my coding, which I had tied to for so long to my sense of like capitalistic self-worth.
Capitalist self-worth. Yes, I think that is possibly the greatest note to end on, which is decoupling your sense of self with your capitalist self-worth that is given to us by this capitalist, structure that we all live in inherently. So we are almost at the end of this lovely 2-day stream with our first guest, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, we will be, working on finishing up our illustrations. So if you would like to see the end outcome, definitely follow us on Instagram and on Twitter, and we'll also be sharing it on Behance. Thanks to everyone who joined us in the chat for this lovely, fun conversation. And yeah, congrats to Ivy as well for winning the giveaway today. Yeah, so once again, thanks again to Amy for joining us as our first stream, and it was fun. We'll see you next time. Bye!